What's going on, everyone? Once again, we're going to do another double eye SWI, and if you don't know what these are, basically I take a look back at the older technology and just kind of see whether it's still worth it, whether it's not, whether there's better deals for the money. And obviously if you have all the money in the world or whatever, then go get the newest phone. I totally understand that, but I think the best thing to do is kind of get the best value per dollar, and I don't think the newest phones offer that, if I'm being dead honest. I feel like they're just super expensive, and older technology is getting cheaper and cheaper, so kind of taking a look back in the older technology, seeing if they're still worth it, all that good stuff. And we're going to be talking about the LG G7. Now, I don't know what LG was thinking by adding the think or the thin Q thing at the end. I don't know why they did that. They did the same thing with the LG V40, I think, and the G8 and the V50 that's coming out now. I honestly don't understand that. I'm sure there's some meaning behind it, but it's just kind of annoying. Now, the LG G7 came out in May of 2018, so it hasn't been out quite a year yet, but in a couple months it will be, and we've already seen the release of the LG G8, at least it was announced, and I definitely do think that's a pretty big upgrade from the G7. I mean, you get a lot of, like, I would say they're kind of gimmicks in a way. I've already done a G7 versus G8 comparison, so if you want to see that, you can go back in the channel and watch it. But I definitely do think in my time of owning the LG G7, I was kind of shocked in a way of how good of a phone it still is. And before I delve into that, let me just talk about the overall phone itself. So it has an IPS panel up front, it's 1440p, it's 6.1 inches, and honestly, I think it's a pretty good panel. I even looked at the LG G6's panel, and that was a very sharp panel as well. It's 564 pixels per inch, and you know, specs are one thing, but I'll definitely tell you, when I'm holding it, I prefer OLED phones. I like OLED. All my devices now, my iPhone 10 is OLED, my Galaxy S10, all these phones are OLED devices, and I have the iPhone 10R, which is an IPS panel, and I'll definitely say the LG G7's panel is very, very good for an IPS panel. Now, thankfully, they did switch to OLED on the LG G8, but nonetheless, the G7 has a very good panel. It is IP68 dust and water resistant, so you can go 1.5 meters for up to 30 minutes, so that's very, very awesome. And the overall phone, you do have glass on the back as well, so it makes it feel a lot more premium. You have a fingerprint sensor back there too, and I'll definitely say the overall phone, the way it feels, it doesn't feel cheap at all. It feels very, very premium. I feel like ever since the LG G6, which was its predecessor, they really started focusing more on the premium builtness of it. I don't know if that's a word, but with that, they took away the removable battery with the G6, but I guess it's whatever. So that kind of covers up the overall feel of the phone. I kind of want to talk about software real quick, okay? So this thing was released with Android 8.0 Oreo. This phone is supposed to get Android Pie at some point, but the sad thing is that Android Q is already coming out in a very short amount of time. I've already done an Android Q review of it, and I tested it, and I like it a lot. The features are really cool, but this phone, in a way, is already going to be like obsolete in terms of software. Not obsolete, but it's going to be kind of outdated in the software even once it gets Android Pie. So I don't know if this phone's going to get Android Q. I have no idea really. LG doesn't talk to me. I don't get sponsored by them, so I have no insider knowledge. But if I could take a guess, I would say it probably would get Android Q following the past trends of LG phones. But here's the thing, okay? I personally own the LG G2. That was a very solid phone until it started developing issues, hardware issues at that. And what I will tell you is, if this phone is kind of like the LG G2 in a way, the LG G7 should be getting a lot of third-party development community support behind it. So even though there's probably Android Pie ROMs, Android Oreo ROMs for this thing, in a couple months we could possibly start seeing some Android Q ROMs out for this thing. So even if you like LG's UI, I personally don't like it that much. I would probably recommend you to go and flash and custom ROM your LG G7. Even though it's probably still under support, it's probably going to be a while to get that support and get a new update. So that's probably where I'm going to leave that at in terms of software. It's not a horrible phone in terms of software or anything like that. It's still kind of supported, but I would probably recommend you to custom ROM it once some stable Android Q ROMs come out for it. But that's my opinion. Obviously, do whatever you want. Now, in terms of the performance, this is kind of interesting, okay? It had the Qualcomm Snapdragon 845 chipset, an octa-core CPU, an Adreno 630 GPU, and 6 gigs of RAM on the 128 gig variant, and 4 gigs RAM on the 64 gig variant. And this is kind of interesting. I had the 4 gig model, I had the 64 gig model when I was messing around with it and testing this specific device you're watching this on, and the performance I had was very, very solid. I had really nothing that was crazy. I think specs are one thing, but when you're using the device, it's completely different. And I used all the devices I've used. I own the Galaxy S10, I own the iPhone 10R, the 10s, I've owned all these phones. And with the G7, I felt it feel very fast in a way. Like, it wasn't the fastest thing. If I did a speed comparison between this or even like an iPhone 10s, the iPhone 10s will probably beat it. But this phone definitely doesn't feel slow at all. And I still think, you know, it still has a lot going for it. When I'm multitasking through apps, opening apps, having things in the background, going back to them, I don't think it's slow. I think it's definitely above average. And the cool thing is, this device isn't even that expensive anymore. So in terms of performance, you're getting a very high performing phone for the price, which is pretty awesome, and that's actually what I like seeing in a device. And whether you're doing light multitasking, heavy multitasking, of course, if your means are heavier, if you need more from a phone, you can get the 6 gig model for 128 gigs of the internal storage, and I'd really recommend that too. And in terms of gaming and everything, obviously it's going to be perfectly fine. I always found that the LG G6 wasn't that bad in performing either, but the G7 definitely takes it up a notch, and even though it might be slower than the newest devices we have released now, I still think for the price and value, it's a very, very good performing phone, and I have nothing but really good reviews of it. So in terms of overall performance, when you factor in the age of this phone, even though it's only like a year, also the price of it as well, it's a pretty good performing phone, and in terms of that, I don't have anything bad to say about it. And another thing I have nothing bad to say about is the camera. So this thing has dual 16 megapixel cameras on the back. You can do things like wide photos, ultra wide photos, optical image stabilization, laser autofocus on this as well. And what I'll tell you is, man, this camera is very, very solid. I've always liked LG's cameras. I don't think they're the best. I don't think they're better than Samsung's or iPhone's, definitely not without a doubt. But this phone has a very solid camera sensor in it. Both of them are very, very good. You can shoot 4K at up to 60 frames per second. And without a doubt, this camera sensor is very good, whether you're outside, inside. I mean, a camera sensor is a camera sensor. If you watch my videos for a long time, you know I don't really like talking about cameras that much. It's not that I don't like talking about them, but I just feel like they're not improving as much as people are saying they're improving. I wish we could focus on other aspects of a phone. But for the case of this LG G7, I like it. I don't have anything bad to say about it. It does have an 8 megapixel front-facing camera, and surprisingly, you can do 1080p at up to 60 frames per second, which is cool. There's some cameras now that can shoot 1440p and 4K on the front camera. So in that year, we've actually developed a lot in terms of the phone, but this one only 1080p is probably not even going to be a big deal to any of you. So in terms of the camera, both front and back, I like them as well. Really nothing bad to say about them. Again, this is a very safe phone in my opinion. It sits right in the middle. I think LG's learned a lot from their past, and I think the cameras on this phone are very solid. Now in terms of the battery life, this is an interesting topic because I love battery life. I love having a phone that lasts all day. The LG G7 had a 3000 mAh battery. Now this thing does have wireless charging and all that good stuff, USB Type-C, but the thing is that I don't think the battery life is as good as I thought it was going to be. So the thing is that the battery size is one thing, 3000 mAh, but this phone has a lot packed into it, kind of. The 1440p screen, high pixels per inch, pretty decent at performing, and I don't know what it is. I think maybe it was LG's software that really kind of sucked up the battery from inside of it, so it might not even be like a hardware problem. It might just be a software issue. In my specific unit, I mean, it wasn't bad in battery life, but it definitely wasn't good. If you're getting this phone to have it last like a day and a half or something, you're probably not going to get it. Depending on your usage, you might have to charge it by the end of the day. I know for a fact if I took my usage from my iPhone 10 and put it on the G7, it probably wouldn't last all day. I would probably have to charge it, especially considering I keep my Bluetooth on and Wi-Fi on pretty much all day. So in terms of that, I would probably rate this phone in battery life, I mean, very average. It's not the best, it's not horrible, but it sits right in the middle, and that's probably where I'll leave that at. Now, some other notable things to note, like I said, this phone does have a fingerprint sensor on the back, very decent. You do have that notch on the display, which, is kind of hit or miss for some of you guys. Me personally, I'm used to it, I don't really care. But with newer phones, they're obviously going to start taking out the notch, so it's not even that big of a deal. Either you get used to it now, or you get used to it later. Same thing with the removal of the headphone jack, really. This phone also does have a micro SD card slot, which is very, very awesome. I love that whenever a phone manufacturer puts that in their phones, and this phone does have it, so that is very, very cool. You can go up to 512 gigs on it, so you can get the 64 gig model if you don't care about RAM, and put 512 gigs in it, and that's awesome. Now there are some dual SIM models as well, so that's really, really cool. And apparently from what I've heard, I didn't test it out thoroughly, but the speaker system on this phone is very, very awesome as well. So that is super, super cool, and pretty much the whole entire way I would synopsize this phone. If it's between this phone or like a brand new phone and you spending money on a brand new phone, I would say if you have the money, go for it. I see no reason why you wouldn't pick that up. But the thing to keep in mind is that the LG G7 right now on Amazon is selling for around $300, less than $400, and I think it's a very solid phone still. I don't see anything that's wrong with it. It's a very solid phone. So if for some reason you need to pick up an LG G7, I think the best route to go would probably be Amazon. So like I said, if it's between the LG G7 or newest brand new flagship, I might pick up the LG G7. I think it's a better value per dollar. But also following that same trend, if you're already going to go the used route, I would probably recommend picking up a Google Pixel 2 XL over an LG G7. And on Amazon, the Google Pixel 2 XL is cheaper than an LG G7. And that one's selling for around $300 as well, a little bit over, maybe like $320. So I would probably recommend that over the LG LG G7, but really the choice is yours. I'll leave links to a Google Pixel 2 XL and an LG G7 in the description below, as well as the prices. I try to find the cheapest, best prices on Amazon and link them straight below, and every single sale that goes through those links, a little bit of that revenue comes back to the channel. We can do more videos like this and more comparisons and more giveaways, so it'll mean so much if you guys can buy things through that link. But that is pretty much it. If you guys have any questions or anything, leave it down in the comment section below. Hit that like button, that'll mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber that we get really does count, so it'll mean so much if you guys could hit that. Also check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my second channel, all those links are linked down below. I would really appreciate if you guys could check it out. But more importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.